The metaverse is emerging as the next big technology platform and promises to become the next frontier for human experiences on the internet. Into the Metaverse covers companies, technologies, and trends that are bringing this promise to life. Join thought leaders Matthew Canterman, CFA, the Director of Research at Ball Metaverse Research Partners, and Jonathan Raz-Friedman, founder and CEO of Super Social, as they interview the brilliant minds building, shaping, and investing in the Metaverse.
Welcome to Lucky Number episode 13 of season 2 of Into the Metaverse. Joining us today is a wonderful guest, Dean Takahashi of GamesBeat, to discuss the growth of the metaverse and how gaming companies are evolving into the metaverse era. Dean's been a lead writer for GamesBeat for nearly 15 years. Prior to that, he was a journalist at publications including the San Jose Mercury News and the Wall Street Journal. Welcome, Dean.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
All right. So, Dean, let's dive right into it. We continue to prod away at our guests to build a consensus around just what it is that the metaverse is actually. And given how many companies you talk to, how many great minds you interview, you probably also have a consensus forming across all of these amazing conversations. And I have to say also something you kind of keep repeating as well in all of your pieces on VentureBeat and GamesBeat with regards to the metaverse. And so how do you define the metaverse? And maybe more importantly, based on all of the things you've been reading and learning and talking to people, what is the metaverse not?
Well, I benefit from talking to a lot of different people, and we actually asked this question of a few dozen members of this metaverse forum that we created. It's a collection of sort of thought leaders in the space, and Tony Parisi answered that it's the spatial internet, and I think that's a pretty good definition. But I think he and a lot of other people also include 2D screens in that definition as well, and it's not just virtual reality, not just 3D graphics based platforms, and so. In that sense, you could include, augmented reality and with location-based, data, and I think that's a pretty good definition. There was another one from Matthew Ball, who's a pretty famous prognosticator in this space and an investor, and he said that the metaverse should make you feel like you're inside of something, that you're inside another world, and I like that one too. And that is suggesting more of a virtual reality environment, but the sense of immersion that you get from that, and the sense of presence that you've been transported someplace else. I think I like those definitions. So, and that's what our copy, I guess.
No, these are great definitions from some great minds, and so in that same wavelength, and maybe also you can reference some of the great thinkers that you've been interacting with. Mm-hmm. If that's the definition of what is the metaverse, what does it mean that the metaverse is not? And the reason we're asking that question is because, as you know, Facebook changed their name to Meta last year and really created a reality where many, many people, millions of people, started to associate the metaverse and whatever it is that they think of it, the metaverse, with virtual reality headsets, because that's what Meta showed when they made the change. And we have been, Matthew and I in the podcast have been kind of big proponents of the notion that the metaverse is device agnostic. No device, no form factor owns the metaverse. And so we like to really argue quite consistently that the metaverse is not a certain device. But we're really curious about your point of view of what the metaverse is not. Do you subscribe to that worldview, or?
Yeah, I would agree with that, and I would also add to the definition by saying the metaverse is not just a single world. And so if Meta were to sort of proceed and create lots of different applications inside some meta-based world, then I don't think that would be the metaverse. It would be a nice walled garden that would be part of something larger. And that larger thing, I think, would be the real metaverse. And so a collection of virtual worlds or universes and experiences, I think, is what really would constitute the metaverse. John Riccitiello recently gave a speech over at the Augmented World Expo, where he said, we're going to have millions of destinations in the metaverse, and just like the number of websites that we have out there, except that these destinations are going to be their own sort of self-contained worlds. And I think I buy that. So the metaverse has to sound a lot more impressive than just what we have today. And the other thing I think it is not, I've heard Strauss Zelnick, the CEO of Take-Two Interactive, say, hey, we've done this, we've been there, we've done that, and things like Second Life were an abject failure decades ago. And what we have now in the form of Grand Theft Auto Online is as close to a metaverse as he thinks we will need or we will want. And GTA Online is very popular, but I don't think that's the metaverse. And I also don't think Second Life as it is, running so many years later is also, it's not a metaverse. I think to say that those things are metaverses is to have a sort of a lack of imagination.
That is true, and I would
totally agree. I mean,
go ahead, Matthew.
No, I was just going to say that I agree with that, and I think a term that's been used that I picked up from, I think it was from Mario at Roundhill, was we're calling these proto metaverse gaming experiences. I think that's although that's a mouthful, that's the right term for these sorts of things. Roblox, Fortnite, Grand Theft Auto Online, because they have elements of a metaverse, but they're gaming platforms at their heart. And these are the type of things that we think will lead us into the metaverse as we get towards this true vision of what we think the metaverse is, but we're not there yet. And I think that's exactly kind of what you're getting at.
And I also think that there is this misconception that the metaverse is this massive multiplayer RPG, right? That suddenly the entire world is going to want to live inside a multiplayer RPG or a MOBA, right? Like a massive multiplayer online battle game. That's just not going to happen. Gaming is growing, but to think that 8 billion people will use a metaverse or an experience that is fully a multiplayer online game is definitely a misconception. And I would add to what the fantastic thing you said, Dean, is that it's going to also be incredibly diverse. There are going to be all sorts of experiences. And I do resonate with someone like Dave Baszucki that really claims the metaverse is going to be a place where, we have things where we work and play and learn and experience music and maybe many, many more things that the metaverse will create that really don't exist until today. But I want to build on top of that. And I think that's a great springboard to talking a bit about Web3 and blockchain and crypto, because you're also digging into these areas. And so as it relates to the metaverse, what are some of the things that you've learned on how Web3 intersect with enabling that collection of multiple worlds with multiple applications?
I think we're at a stage where we're at a fork in the road for blockchain technology and Web3, and we may go down a path where we use it for the metaverse and that we embrace it. But there's also a lot of people out there, especially in the gaming world, the hardcore gamers and some game developers who don't think it adds that much to the experiences that we can create right now. And and it either needs a whole lot of improvement and a leveling up of technology, just like we've waited forever for graphics to kind of get good enough or look good enough to mirror reality. It almost feels like we're at the sort of very beginning of blockchain technology, and that this stack has to evolve a lot more and become a lot simpler to use. As an example, there's centralized technologies that are at the heart of this sort of decentralized blockchain technology effort right now, like OpenSea. And if OpenSea goes out of business, then 90% of the NFTs out there might become worthless, right? And so I think we can create a world where that doesn't happen, but we're not there just yet, right? So I think that decentralization has some holes in it right now that need to be plugged with more decentralized technology. But I do see the path, that where blockchain technology could become useful, like, verifying something is unique, clarifying ownership of who owns a particular item, whether you can take that item with you from one place to another, whether those items are going to be interoperable or not. And we're just beginning to see sort of more utility with NFTs in places like an announcement that happened, today was the Manticore Games core folks said that they're going to give a lot more utility to NFTs by recognizing any Ethereum-based NFT in a MetaMask wallet, and then allowing people to make use of that in the world of core. And so, like, if you have an NFT that right now is just nothing but a D&D dungeon, right? And it's just like a 2D representation of a dungeon. The folks at Core might take that and actually build that dungeon out, and then give some real meaning and real sort of substance to that NFT, and link them together. And so then, there's just a lot more reason to have it or own it and to buy it. So I think we could be sort of on the verge of proving the utility of these things if the gamers and others come to accept them. And that's a big if right now, I think. Sorry, I lost your...
Dean, what?
Okay, yeah.
Dean, I'll start again. Mm-hmm. Dean, where do you think we are in this cycle? Because we've seen things like the reactions from some core gamer communities, quote unquote traditional game companies. Where do you, to the best interpretation of reality that you have, where do we think we are in this cycle in the adoption curve of NFT games within core gaming communities, not the quote unquote financially driven play to earn games, which, as a side note, we kind of, Matthew and I, believe that it's going to be a very, very tiny fraction or a small subset of blockchain gaming. So if we talk about blockchain gaming, where do you think we are in the adoption cycle of the actual gamer community that today is mostly spend time on Xbox, Nintendo Switch, PC gaming, mobile free to play, and so on and so forth?
Well, I think that gamers know that a lot of the best games these days are taking 5 or more years to build, and the blockchain game companies haven't been at work that long, and they also haven't had the same sort of sensibility that the AAA game developers have about creating games. And so, they've been creating games that take maybe 6 months or a year to complete. And those are what are appearing in the market now. I mean, it's it's barely a year and a half since we've had any success with blockchain games at all, and the attention came to the space, and money started pouring in, and people started funding these projects. And so the folks who moved in from the AAA gaming community, they're still at work on their games, and they haven't finished them, and it's going to be a while. And so like we're in kind of like a vulnerable period for the technology where the gamers are basically saying, I don't believe you. I don't believe in this stuff. I think you're trying to take my money away from me. Show me some games. And the blockchain gaming community is saying, we're working on it, but we don't have anything to show you right now.
It's just around the corner, 2024, you know?
Yeah, but it is interesting to see, one particular company, this Wild Card Alliance, which is a division of Playful Studios, and a company run by Paul Bettner, who was one of the people behind Words with Friends and Lucky's Tale in virtual reality. They've been working on a game for 5 years, and they adapted it to the blockchain, and they have a game to show. The first thing they did when they announced last week was show me a working mobile-like RTS slash fighting game that really looked like a AAA experience. And they said, oh, by the way, we've built blockchain technology into this, and that's a rare case right now where you have something that's been in the works for 5 years, and it really does explore utility for a gaming community through NFTs and blockchain. So I sort of feel some confidence that if you put some of the best game developers to work on blockchain games, that in a few years, whatever it is, 2 to 3 to 5 years, they're going to come up with some amazing things that will put this argument to rest about whether or not there's any good blockchain games out there, right? They're just going to be good games at some point that happen to use blockchain. And so I think it's a bit of a vulnerable time right now where people who want to shout down all of this exploration, experimentation, they have some more power to do so. Like, they can cause people to abandon projects, and they could cause venture capitalists to get cold feet because there's some kind of gamer revolt going on out there. And I don't think that would be a good thing for the industry. I do think that a lot of if you follow that usual lesson of follow the money, that a lot of that money goes into the hands of smart people, and they usually do good things with it.
Yeah, I was going to follow up on something you were saying, and then I'll tie to your last comment there. To your point about the next generation of blockchain games is kind of what we're waiting for. I think we all are waiting for the day where there's a blockchain game where you don't know it's a blockchain game. Just like when you play a game, you don't necessarily care if it's Unity or Unreal as long as it's awesome. And for the same thing, like if people play something and it's fun, they won't care what technology is making that thing work. And then if you get something that has value in the background while you're doing it, fantastic. We've also talked about it with Ryan Wyatt and Sorrow from Alien World on this podcast, prior episodes, making the on-ramp easier for non-crypto natives. To play a blockchain game right now, you need a wallet, you need all the different coins, you got to set everything up, and it's not easy. It's not like the App Store. It's not like Xbox where you click a button and you're in. And so, easing that on-ramp, I think, is also something that we're still trying to figure out. But, going back to your last point about VCs and the money side of it, I wanted to ask about that. So you took us there. So, we've obviously seen the crypto market crater, and that's still going on as we're recording right now. It's still kind of crazy right now. But there have been massive inflows from VCs into the space. I mean, Andreessen Horowitz, A16Z, just raised a $4.5 billion crypto fund, despite Ethereum being down 80%. So it's like, there's still plenty of capital available for these companies. what's your take on how VCs and startups are approaching the market now? Have you seen a lot change in the last few weeks, months with the crypto market flows?
Well, I guess one encouraging thing for the game companies out there that are either considering blockchain or even not, and just need to raise money, is that the game industry is sort of on an upward cycle when it comes to investment coming into the industry. And so, like in the first quarter, game investment was up dramatically over a year ago, whereas in the US, the entire tech venture capital industry was starting to decline already because of different economic concerns that people have right now, and it really sort of plummeted with the invasion of Ukraine, right? And then I think the game industry VCs have raised a lot of secondary sort of funds now, and they have a lot of capital, they have a lot of dry powder that they can put to work, and so the investment is, as long as everybody makes their capital calls, I guess, then we can expect that capital raised for venture funds in gaming to get deployed. And so I think that we're going to have an upward cycle for game investments for quite some time, and that's going to be good for jobs in the industry. It's going to be good for startups. A lot of the blockchain game companies are getting a good share of that. In fact, they got about a third of all of the fundings in the first quarter. The thing that was a little worrisome to me was that some of the VCs, game VCs, were reporting that 90% of the pitches coming into them were about blockchain games. And to me, that sounds a bit much. Like, it's crazy. It's kind of insane. It's part of a hype trend. And, that kind of behavior probably has to stop. That, either the entrepreneurs are predicting that that's all the VCs are interested in, or VCs have sent some signals out that this is what they want, and I hope that part of the picture stabilizes and comes to reflect that right now blockchain games are about 1% or 0.5% of the entire game industry, right? And so they should not be commanding all of that capital flow for sure. But yeah, I'm actually I do expect at some point that gravity can pull down that level of investment by game VCs, as well as pull down the entire game industry if the economy around the world gets bad enough.
Yeah, that's really interesting what you're saying about it's almost preposterous that 90% of pitches in gaming is blockchain when it's 1% of the current market. But then also what you're saying is that although majority of game pitches are blockchain, about a third gets the funding, which, by the way, in my mind, it's still a lot, right? In comparison to the market share of blockchain. But I'm suspecting we will reach a certain equilibrium. And I'm certain that a lot of the entrepreneurs that are raising money are using the blockchain story to raise money.
And then they go do something else.
And then they either do go something else, but which is why I think ultimately the reason we're going to reach some form of equilibrium is because what happens now is a great filter for those who want to build with blockchain for genuine reasons, and they believe that technology can truly help them deliver something novel, unique, with real benefits to players and users, versus the ones that have only been riding the wave for opportunistic reasons, which there's nothing wrong with that. There's a lot of great ventures that were built by opportunistic entrepreneurs. But I think you're going to start seeing decline because of where we are now. And so it may well be that after this financial uncertainty, the next hot thing is not necessarily going to be blockchain. It might be something completely different that may not even have anything to do with gaming, right? Because a third of all venture going into gaming, that's also a bit unlikely, because that means a third of venture investment in gaming, which is one of many, many, many sectors in venture capital, right?
Actually, a third of the money going into game investments was blockchain related. So that's the 1/3.
How much, out of curiosity, do you have a data point of how much gaming overall as a sector was part of VC investments in Q1 or the first half? I don't want to put you on the spot, so if you don't know, don't worry about that.
I don't know exactly, but I do believe it's a very small slice overall.
Okay.
So
it's still a small slice, but I feel like we're in a position where it's like every time someone goes out and raises a new VC fund, my reaction is, that's crazy big. No one's ever going to raise a fund bigger than that. And then 2 weeks later, someone else beats it by $50 million or $100 million and raises an even bigger fund. It's like, and even still, it keeps going up and up and up. And it's just ridiculous, because if you're raising a $600 million fund, I remember people talked about this when Griffin did that. And then A16Z has a $650 million gaming fund. It's like, if you're doing seed stage investments, and they're not all seed, some of it's growth, but if you're doing seed stage investments, $10 million round max. Like if you're doing Series A and B, you're talking maybe a $50 million round. Like you've got to find 50, 60 good quality investments to fulfill that fund. That's a lot. And that's a lot of projects that you have to find to invest in and expect a return on. I know VC, they take chances and they don't expect everything to pan out, but like, I don't want to say anything bad about anyone that's starting a company, but is there that many good quality companies to invest in? I mean, that's the big question mark that we're getting towards.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think that I'd agree with that, but I also think that gaming has been undersold for a long time, right? And this whole metaverse thing, McKinsey just came out and said that the metaverse valuation should hit $5 trillion by the year 2030. They thought that gaming was only a $125 billion slice of that. I think that's the part that's incorrect. And I believe that if anybody has a shot at building the metaverse, it's the game companies that are in the pole position right now. And that they have every advantage because, as Jason Rubin from Meta said, that he has to believe that the metaverse is going to be built with a game engine. And the people who understand how to use game engines right now are game developers. And, all these other industries are starting to adopt game engines, but the game developers already know this and they use it. And so I think that's a very good reason to believe. Like, I also think of who has command of our time right now and the hours in a day. And so I think maybe when we spend, 12 or 16 hours a day in the online world, that's the metaverse. Like that's when we're basically living in an online world. And I think the applications right now that have our attention that we're using that probably edge out, may edge out, may not, social media are the things that people are doing are playing games online, right? And so I think the game companies have that now. They've amassed large audiences, and I think what they need to do is think about figuring out ways how they're going to get to those 12 hours a day, I guess, or 16 hours a day. It might not be a good world if we really did get there. Maybe too much online consumption, but that's maybe how you measure who's winning and who's not right now. And I think that the game industry on the path to the metaverse is winning.
Great message out.
I was about to ask you that, so I'm glad you already answered it. Oops. Mm-hmm. I think we're having a little bit of lag, but that's okay. You were about to. I was about to ask you that question, and you kind of answered it. What do game companies have to do to stay relevant in the metaverse era? But so I'll just move right on, and I think as a follow up to that, since you kind of already laid that out, what they have to do. We've seen a lot of consolidation in the gaming sector at the high end, the publicly traded companies. There's nobody left anymore, and if my theory is that if Activision does get acquired by Microsoft, there's going to be more consolidation, not less. And I think you'll see more of the big tech companies look at the game, like Amazon, look at the gaming sector and make a play for EA or Take-Two or whomever. Or Take-Two's already acquired Zynga, EA Glue, etc. So how does consolidation in the sector, particularly at the high end there, affect at all what you think the gaming sector trajectory in the metaverse era is? Does that put them at a weaker position, a stronger position? Just curious how you think about all that.
Well, I do think that a company with one property and one walled garden is really it's not going to win the whole open metaverse, right? It's not going to take over everything, but something that I believe could be like an economic powerhouse would be something more like Disneyland, right? If you own a ton of properties and you just sort of set them up as like, here's Call of Duty land, as Activision, Blizzard, Microsoft could have, and here's Halo land, and here's Forza land, and you provide all these different sort of adventures for people to engage in, and you make it so that they can sort of seamlessly cross from one to another. Like an e-ticket will get you access to all of this stuff, and right now that's Xbox Game Pass, right? And so like if you subscribe to Xbox Game Pass, you get access to all these different lands or these different worlds, and I think that collection of worlds in something like a theme park or a Disneyland would be very close to being the winner. But the sort of the problem with consolidation is that, people can come up with those master plan strategies, right? The CEOs of these big companies. But we always have to remember that this industry is basically represented by tension between the suits and the creators, right? And the creators, they're not necessarily going to be inspired to stay in that kind of world where they're just working for somebody who's building a tiny piece in a very gigantic Disneyland, right? And I think rather they would split off, and they would, sort of start the process again of diversifying the industry into different kinds of indie game studios. And so whenever somebody acquires a bunch of studios, you can expect a lot of people are going to leave those studios and go off and start their own new things, because now they've got some capital in their pockets, right? So there's, I think, constant tension between something like a gigantic consolidated walled garden and the open metaverse as represented by a lot of indies.
And I think that if we take Roblox as an example, I think what Roblox within their walled garden proved is that there is incredible appetite from a whole new generation of creators and developers who want to build things on their own. They want to work together. They want to collaborate. And to me, although Roblox is a walled garden platform, I think as a paradigm, I can see how that extrapolates to the wider open metaverse. And one of our all-time greatest episodes was with Rev from NVIDIA, right, who runs the Omniverse and Simulation division. And we spoke to Rev about how important it is to NVIDIA's mission to democratize the tools of real-time 3D creation, so anyone can really build those quote-unquote metaverse experiences and put the power in the hands of creators of all sorts from all over the world, which I think, again, at a smaller extent as a prototype of that, that's what Roblox has done, at least, in my mind. And
I'm glad you actually brought up NVIDIA because and the Omniverse, because I do believe that the game industry is really too small to build the metaverse. It doesn't have enough people, right? And when you think about things like NVIDIA's Omniverse, which started as a robot simulation technology and has grown up to be a simulation sort of platform for anything, right? BMW wants to build a factory, they build a digital twin, they design it in the Omniverse, and then they perfect it there, and then they produce the real thing in the physical world, the real factory. And I think that this model that they've created, where lots of different companies can contribute all of your 3D assets and the worlds they've created, or the realistic places that they have captured and put it into this Omniverse. And I think there's potential there to really help the game industry, with things like real world assets. And so NVIDIA has said that they want to use the Omniverse to build a digital twin of the Earth and use all the supercomputers of the world to do this Earth 2 simulation, and to build a digital twin of the entire Earth, so they can predict climate change for decades ahead. And they can actually finance this, based on the need, right? We actually, all the governments of the world would probably pay for this kind of technology, right? And then once it's built, then we have a digital twin of the Earth that could be repurposed as a kind of metaverse for anybody who wants to build out any portion of that. Like, Rockstar Games, they might want New York City, and sort of the perfect simulation of New York City, and they would take that piece of the Omniverse and they would build it out. And maybe they would trade that over to Ubisoft, which would build Paris, and they trade these cities around. On top of that, NVIDIA also has that reason to build the Omniverse through self-driving cars, so that they can test self-driving cars in a virtual world, like the virtual United States, and sort of take care of all of the corner cases that they need to, so that they don't have to test self-driving cars in the real world and cause a lot of accidents, right? And so I think that there's other reasons that all of the tools and the assets of the metaverse get built, and then they can be used by the game industry to build the entertainment or the game-oriented metaverse, right? So I'm very optimistic that there's a lot of help coming for the game industry, because everybody kind of shares this vision right now.
So well said and well articulated, really nothing to add. And all I can say is that I think in a world where a metaverse, at least at the moment, is shaped by game developers, right? I think it's also important that the metaverse is shaped by game developers, but it's not just about games, but we also reimagine other type of experiences that can bring people together, and also creating opportunities for socialization, entertainment, education. And I think we're really, in my mind, we're not even scratching the surface yet with what's possible when the metaverse really emerges. We're kind of in the first inning of that journey, which is very much about games, but I am very much excited about what is those other use cases and possibilities enabled by these emerging technologies.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, like, simulation is about play, and play is extremely valuable, and that's what game developers do so well with entertaining us. But all of life is not about play. I mean, simulation is so much bigger than play, right? It can teach us things, and we can learn from those simulations, and that advances human knowledge and our own experiences.
Exactly. So, Dean, before we conclude, one more question we want to kind of talk about. So when you look out across the metaverse landscape as it is at the moment, and as we kind of envision it for the next 5 to 10 years, is there one company or even one part or a set of parts in the metaverse supply chain that you find most interesting, that people aren't yet really paying attention to?
I mean, I think the spotlight is on Meta right now for its ambition to create the metaverse, and its willingness to lose $3 billion a quarter in order to finance all of the research it's doing. And it has shown some very impressive displays that are prototypes right now. But I also believe that NVIDIA is in the right position to really execute on a sort of a much broader vision than just virtual reality, than just games, and as I just mentioned, all of the things related to this omniverse. And they are a trusted party right now. They don't have as mixed a reputation as some of the other companies that are, where you can see their intentions from a mile away, right? And you can be suspicious of them. And so I think they're in some ways in control of a technology that's very important, and that they want to guide this towards an open metaverse, right? They think that it'd be much bigger if they're sort of a steward for the technology that is owned by almost everybody, right? And, so I would hope that a company like that can guide us in the right way. I do believe that there's lots of other pieces of the metaverse that still have to get invented, and I think that whoever sort of brings us to this world where we get a real-time metaverse, that can pack thousands of people all doing different things inside something like a concert, where the world simulation keeps up with all of that. I think that kind of technology is probably missing right now. I don't think the internet as it is right now is going to be able to handle the load of the metaverse. So I'm hoping that somebody's going to invent some of that. And there's some small startups that are talking about that right now, but I don't necessarily see anybody who's pulling it off.
Matthew, anything you'd like to add here?
No, I totally agree. The infrastructure to support exactly what you're talking about doesn't exist yet. I remember, we had the same conversation with online games 20 years ago, and Riot said, screw it, we're going to build our own internet because the internet's not good enough. And they built Riot Direct. And, I think we're kind of at the same inflection point in the metaverse where, once again, we need a better internet. We need lower latency. We need faster speeds. We need bigger capacity. Is this going to be built off the shelf that we can use, or is it going to be purpose built by someone particular? And I don't know the answer yet, but, I think, and I have the benefit of knowing someone who is very intimate to the Riot Direct because he ran the business for a while. Like he even said, if they built it today, they'd build it in AWS, but AWS didn't exist when they built it. And so, maybe it can be built out of the cloud at this point, but I don't know. I think we still have a decade until we actually get to that point. So it's going to be that's going to be one of the most interesting areas. So I totally agree.
Well, this has been a fascinating conversation, an optimistic conversation, and I think, Dean, you shared a bunch of really smart, wise observation on this space. I think the key takeaway for us, and I think for the audience as well, is how early we are in this journey. And that is really exciting and challenging at the same time. And I think there is a lot to be optimistic about. And so if you share the optimism and you want to hear more, follow us on Twitter, subscribe to the Substack, check the podcast on Spotify, Apple, and Anchor. And, we're excited to bring you more voices. And Dean, thank you so much. This has been absolutely fantastic. Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you. Appreciate it. It's been fun.